When I was a kid, I wanted to be either an exterminator, astronaut, mad scientist, or a vampire when I grew up. I tried staying up all night a few times, but never made it past midnight, so I crossed vampire off the list. I found out that to become an astronaut or a scientist, mad or sane, you needed a truckload of qualifications. By this time, I'd already left school, and there was no way I was going back. So, they were strikes as well. Which left Exterminator. I'm 35 now. I have my own one-man business, a boiler suit with my initials on the back, and debts that could make a grown man weep, and sometimes do after enough beers. I've dealt with some pretty gross things in my time. Bugs and other pests and critters that find their way into people's homes and workplaces, and the filth and chaos they create. I always knew what I was dealing with, though. Until a few days ago. I'd been called out to a new apartment block. It was in an up-and-coming area, as they say. Once slum housing and derelict warehouses as far as the eye could see. The developers had bought cheap and leveled everything. Now townhouses and restaurants and art galleries were popping up and being featured in weekend supplements. And at the heart of it all stood this sleek, environmentally friendly, exclusive property. I'd seen it described as a habitat for those who know no limits, which was BS if you asked me, not that anyone ever did. I'd been told to go to the service entrance tucked away around the back and to not advertise my presence there on social media. I had the feeling the management did not want their fancy pants tenants and prospective buyers to know unwanted visitors were chewing up and soiling their building. I didn't blame them, and I was too excited to care anyway. I'd arrived carrying my new bug buster spray in a canister inside my backpack, and I could not wait to try it out. Its main constituent was a bacteria that had grown on a meaty beast pizza left out in the open for 3 months during the hottest summer on record. I buzzed the intercom, smiled into the camera, and showed my ID. A moment later, the door swung open. It groaned and clanged like service entrances the world over. I guess the bespoke materials and expert craftsmanship had not extended to every corner of the place. I found myself in a barely lit basement, and I flicked my torch on. My mobile rang. "You got 'em, I kill 'em," I answered. My standard patter brought an exasperated sigh from whoever was on the other end of the line, followed by, "I hope I will not regret hiring you." I shot back with, "No one ever has." "Good. Well, we need to resolve this unfortunate matter as soon as possible." I grunted in what I hoped was a sympathetic way and let them continue. "A small number of the residents have complained of scratching sounds during the night and an unpleasant smell. I can only assume it is an infestation." He said this last word like it was a personal affront, as if a rat had crapped in his herbal tea and given him the finger afterwards. "Sounds likely," I told him. Expert professional advice was included in my fee. Before he could start telling me the rest of his life story, how the yacht he'd been given for his 18th birthday was too small, how Daddy never really loved him, I asked, "So you want me to start down here in the bowels?" He cleared his throat. I hoped he was coming down with something. "In the basement, yes," he said. "You see, and this is strictly confidential, when the building was constructed, the foundations of previous properties were incorporated. The cost of removing them completely were prohibitive, and the engineers assured me there would be no issues." "Gotcha," I told him. "You've inherited your pests from the poor people who used to live around here." "That is not what I'm saying at all," he spluttered. But we both knew it was. I signed off with a cheery, "Fumigate you later," and set off to find whatever was crawling around on 4 or 6 legs and dragging down the property prices. My heart was fair bleeding for the poor rich darlings. I suspected that whatever was causing the problem was not down here. Pests, however many legs they have, or snouts or mandibles, are like people in that they like to be warm and near food. The basement smelt damp, and the nearest thing to a meal was the triple sausage muffin I had for breakfast digesting in my guts. But to keep the customer happy, I would do a cursory sweep. It came as a surprise to me then, when my torchlight caught a glistening trail running from the ceiling down one wall and into a hole in the corner of the floor. So my client was right. There were pests down here. I moved closer. It looked like insect secretion, a large number of them from around the gunk. I didn't know if they were currently heading up in the world or down. I decided to start at the bottom. Even with my backpack on, it only took me a matter of seconds to wriggle through the hole. I dropped gracelessly down and found myself standing on a stone surface. I started to swing the beam of the torch around, and a much older-looking basement began to be revealed to me. The light passed rusted rebar sticking from the ground, a yellowing newspaper, and a man's body hanging upside down from the ceiling. I did a double take. It did look like a man, and that his feet were held stuck by more of the secretion which had led me here. He was held there by bug glue. I swallowed down bile, wished I'd only had a double sausage muffin earlier, and moved closer. The torch began to shake in my hand. He was covered all over in yet more of the clear insect goo. It gave his skin where it was exposed a hideous silvery sheen. His eyes were closed, and he didn't seem to be breathing. This was not something for me to deal with. I took out my mobile to phone the emergency services, but had no signal. Damn. I was wondering if I should try and unstick him and get him down to see if he was still alive, when I saw that his flesh was moving. Something under it. A writhing mass. A leg appeared first. It burst out just above his hip and unfurled. It was an insect's limb. I recognized as much straight away, but the scale was way off. An insect with a leg this long would be as big as a tall adult. A second leg broke through the man's flesh. A third. Soon, 6 legs stood proud. The man had not flinched. He was dead then. A small mercy, I thought, and knew there was nothing I could do for him. I needed to get the hell away. Whatever obscenity of nature I was witnessing had clearly already cost one man his life, and I did not want to be next. But I couldn't move. Terror kept me rooted to the spot, and I watched horrified, transfixed, as the tips of mandibles emerged through the skin of the man's throat as the rest of the insect appeared. I saw then that the man had been an empty shell. This hideous creature must have grown inside him, feeding on him until there was nothing left, and it was time for it to emerge. It fell to the ground and began to crawl towards me. I finally managed to break free of the paralysis which had held me and backed away. I found my voice. "You are one ugly SOB. I wouldn't want to wake up next to your mama." Something tickled my neck. I turned my head slowly. Yep, she was a big girl. Or boy. Who cared? The insect that stood behind me must have been 8 feet tall. Its thorax was about as wide as my torso, and its eyes glinted darkly in the light of my torch as I played the beam over its grotesque body. It was impossible to know what it was thinking, if you can call the sparks of instinct that fly around inside such a thing's mind thoughts, but I was just guessing that it was looking at me and seeing an ideal home for another one of its young. 4 giant insects that know no limits. Junior was probably just thinking, seconds. Either way, I was insect food if I didn't do something. I unstrapped my backpack and took out the canister. "Don't fail me now," I whispered, and unleashed a spray of bug buster right into Mama's face. I don't think about what chemicals go into the meat we consume. what's in the animal's feed, how their carcasses are cleaned and treated and spiced up before we fry them and swallow them down. Now, I am clearly not an animal lover or an eco-warrior, and at that moment in time, I was mightily grateful for whatever it is about processed meat plus heat and decay that formed the basis for something which made the giant insect's body just melt away. I felt no sympathy as I then turned the spray on its offspring and reduced it to a puddle of gore. Dog eat dog. Man destroy insect. I stood there panting. I needed to call the police. I needed to get paid, and then I would tell the client what I'd found. But first, I was going for pizza. All the toppings, stuffed crust, the works.